You understand? But anyway, I'm back again, people. Let's continue on. I'm on 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 26. I'm talking about Absalom. He's going to try to take vengeance in his own hands. He is going to take vengeance in his own hands because of what was done to his sister Tamar by Absalom. By Amnon. But Absalom pressed him that he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. So he's like, let's go out, all the sons, all our father's kids. Now Absalom had commanded his servants, saying, mark ye now, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say unto you, smite Amnon, then kill him. And when I say unto you, smite Amnon, then kill him. Fear not, have now I commanded you, be courageous and be valiant. And the servants of Absalom did unto Ammon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and every man gat him up upon his mule and fled. You got to be careful who you follow. You understand? And it came to pass, while they were in the way, the tidings came to David, saying, Absalom hath slain all the king's sons, and there is not one of them left. So he don't bear false witness. That's why people shouldn't just keep spreading what they think they know. So this man come over there, all your sons dead, David. Don't even know the whole story. Then the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the earth, and all his servants stood by with their clothes rent. And Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother, answered and said, let not my lord suppose that they have slain all the young men, the king's sons, for Amnon only is dead. For by the appointment of Absalom, this have been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar. So he already made it in his mind to do what he was going to do. Now therefore let not my lord the king take the thing to his heart, to think that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon only is dead. But Absalom fled, and the young man that kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there came much people by the way of the hillside behind him. And Jonadab said unto the king, behold, the king's sons come, as thy servant said. So it is. And it came to pass, as soon as he had made an end of speaking, that behold, the king's sons came, and lifted up their voice and wept. And the king also and all of his servants wept very sore. But Absalom fled, and went to the Talmai, the son of Amminadab, king of Geshur, and David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur, and was there 3 years. And the soul of King David longed to go forth unto Absalom, for he was confident concerning Amnon, seeing he was dead. He still loved his son. Sounds like somebody we know. King of kings. Even though we do wrong, our Father always still loves us. He does. King David is like a foreshadowing of Jesus in the flesh, whether people want to believe it or not. David was a man after God's own heart. Yes, he did some crazy things, but that's why he had to send Jesus, a perfect man who wasn't going to make the same mistakes. He had to send the Lord. But David was a good king. He just made a stupid decision. In one moment of lust, he caused drama in his home. But the thing is, he trusted in the Lord, he accepted it, and he knew what was going to come upon him. And still yet the Lord delivered him out of all time. God is a forgiving God. He's always been a forgiving God. Jesus died for our sins. Jesus gave us direct contact to the Lord, and he died for our sins. So we don't have to offer no sacrifices anymore. We can come directly to the Lord and ask for forgiveness. You understand? That's the difference from now and then. So I don't know where people get all these different sayings from, but if you read your Bible closely, you'll see. He said, no evil is of God, no lies of God. God is not going to let you just have a smack on the wrist for every time you do evil. No, something's going to befall you because of that. You ask for forgiveness, but I'm not saying every time. You understand? But God is a forgiving God. He's a merciful God. He's been a merciful God. He was merciful to David. But because of what he did, he couldn't let this slide. That's God. This act he did, he couldn't let it slide. Now Joab, the king of Zariah, perceived that the king's heart was toward Absalom. And Joab sent to Tekoa to fetch then a wise woman and said to her, I pray thee. But anyway, here it is. I'm going to fast forward a little bit on this. What happens here? Joab, the king's servant. Now, I'm going to tell you how sneaky Joab is. Now, if we fast forward to the latter end of this, Joab liked Absalom. He was for him. But you won't really feel the whole story until towards the end of David's life, when Absalom is dead and gone, and Joab pledged allegiance to Absalom's son, or no, not son, but descendant somehow, brother, nephew, something. You understand? And he turns away from David. Joab was working right next to David, but on his brother's behalf, somewhat. I mean, on his son's behalf, somewhat. But anyway, he tells a woman to come in there and plead for Absalom in order for Absalom to come back into the house. So this works. Absalom comes back into the house. You understand? But David knew. He was like, I already know that who put you up to this? Absalom did? Yeah. All right, it's cool. Let him come back in. So let's fast forward. Absalom is after his banishment has been come back, as he banished himself, and after that he come back into the home of David. He come back inside. And they're saying, and guess it, not Absalom, Joab set this up. His right-hand man set this up for Absalom to come in. Now, let's go a little further. But let me fast forward a little bit. This is 2 Samuel chapter 14, 27. Unto Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. So Absalom named Tamar after his sister. She was woman of a fair countenance. So Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem and saw not the king's face. So this after all that, he's back into the kingdom, but he still wouldn't visit his father. You understand? But he had 3 sons and 1 daughter. So if fast forward to the future, Joab pledged allegiance to Absalom's son, and because Solomon, David had already swore the kingdom to Solomon, but Absalom's son tried to take it into his hands, right? And Joab conspired against David, and Solomon, and joined towards Absalom. So as you can see the inner workings of this sneaky betrayer who's been along the whole time, sound like Judas, like Joab was a Judas. He did everything that the Lord asked for. The Lord, in this case, the king, King David, everything King David asked, but he was always manipulating things from behind the scenes. He was a master manipulator. Judas, a master manipulator. But guess what? You know what happened to Judas for betraying Jesus? He hanged himself. Well, basically, Joab not necessarily hung himself, but he hung himself. You understand? He died by the sword too. Why? Because of what he did. You understand? So just because evil is happening, that don't mean the person that does the evil is not going to face not the same type judgment a righteous man would. It's all the same. You understand? But let's keep going. So Joab is like a bloodthirsty man. But let me fast forward a little bit. So right now, what's going to happen is Absalom is going to take the kingdom by force from David. Everything that the Lord said. He's going to take the kingdom from David, and all this is going to go on. And David's being pursued into the wilderness, and this and that, and all kind of betrayal, and all these things are going on in David's house. Why? Because of what he did. All this betrayal and things. You know, and even Absalom, he's told him about his wives would be defiled in front of everybody. Absalom took over King David's house and slept with all his concubines in the top of the roof in front of everybody to see. Exactly what God said would happen. And it happened. You understand? So let's fast forward a little bit. I'm going to try to get to the end of this. But Absalom, for what he did, it come back on his own head too. First, he slew his brother for sleeping with his sister. Then he took the king's kingdom back. And I'm going to show you how gracious God is. God gives David his kingdom back. You understand? David went through some things behind this. So, let's go fast forward. So here it is right here. Let me read this part right here. 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 22. This is after he took over the house. So they spread Absalom a tent upon the top of the house. And Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. And the counsel of Ethbaal At the some crazy name, Ahithophel, which he counseled in those days, was as if a man had acquired at the oracle of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel before with David and with Absalom. So here's another person, Ahithophel. You remember that name? He does something. He turns against David too. Guess what? He killed himself. Wow, that's crazy. You know, it's weird how you read the Bible, how a lot of people hung themselves out to dry. You know, some people that just jump on the winning team. They just backwards and forwards. Joab was a little more sneaky than all the rest of them. But anyway, let's go fast forward. Let's see what happens to Absalom. You see, okay. But Joab is still floating around in here too, doing his little mischievous things, you know, and this and that and all that. So let's fast forward a little bit. Here's Absalom. This is what happened to Absalom. All right. So David was a smart king. He sent somebody and was one of his counsels into Absalom, who was like a spy, and that's how David stayed one head of his brother. But he had people in there that would tell him things and make him known everything. God was still on his side, but at the same time, he still had to flee to the wilderness and lose his kingdom. Okay, here it is. Fast forward to the wilderness. 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 5. And the king commanded Joab and Abishai the Ittai, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man, even with Absalom, with his son, because they got him. And all the people heard when the king gave all captains charge concerning Absalom. So the people went out into the field against Israel, and the battle was in the wood of Ephraim, where the people of Israel were slain before the servants of David. And there was there a great slaughter that day of 20,000 men, for the battle was there scattered over the face of all the country, and the wood devoured more people that day that the sword devoured him. But let me give you a little backstory about Absalom. Absalom was a handsome man. He was not really a fighter. He was a beautiful man, a handsome man, long hair down to the floor. They say he used to measure his hair every year. And it was weighed. They say it's weighed like 200 shucks, some whatever. It's weighed a lot. But he was more of a lover, not a fighter. You understand? Just keep that in mind. He wasn't really a battle type person. You understand? He just wanted the kingdom. You know, so he was just, and people looked up to him. He kind of stole the hearts from King David. Like when David let him back in, he would stay outside the king's house at the king's gate. And everybody who wanted to seek David for counsel, Absalom would stop them and he would counsel them. So the people started loving and falling heads over heels for Absalom. All not just because because of that, and because he was a handsome man. You understand? It is what it is. It's written in there for a reason. You know. For the battle was there scattered over the faces of all the country, and the wood devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. And Absalom met the servants of David. And Absalom rode upon a mule, and the mule went under a thick bough of a great oak, and his head caught hold of the oak, and he was taken up between the heaven and the earth. And the mule that was under him went away. Now think about this. But David had gave orders to his servant, say, don't touch my son. Don't touch him. But Joab, he just don't care. He do what he wants to do. He's that type person. I'm going to do what I want to do no matter what. You know what I'm saying? And a certain man saw it and told Joab and said, behold, I saw Absalom hanged in an oak. If he would have just let him know, he would have died on his own. Or he should have did what David said, but it is what it is. It happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. I'm sure David would have helped let Absalom stay alive. It would have hurt him further on in the future. You understand? So he hung himself. A lot of people that seems like in this Bible, a lot of people seem to hang themselves or kill themselves or thrust themselves through with a sword or something. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. There's another guy who sought counsel with Absalom, who was Absalom's counselor, and David's counselor who went there, they would listen to him more so than they listened to him. And this guy, he went home and hung himself because they wouldn't listen to him. But the other counselor that hung himself used to be one of David's right-hand man. There's a lot of betrayal going into the house of David right now. And Joab said unto the named man that told him, and behold, thou sawest him, and why didst thou not smite him there to the ground? And I would have given thee 10 shekels of silver and a girdle. I would have paid you I gave you a girdle and, and 10 shekels of silver. That's Joab for you. And the man said to Joab, though I should receive 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, yet would I not put forth my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing, the king charged thee and Abishai, Ittai, saying, beware that none of touch the young man Absalom. Otherwise I should have brought falsehood against my own life, for there is no matter hid from the king. David knew a lot of stuff now. Now think about how good of a king David was. David knew a lot of things, even though he was going through things now. He was a man after God's own heart, so God let him in on a lot of things. But the king knows all things. There's nothing hidden from him. Then said Joab, I may not tarry thus with thee. And he took 3 darts in his hand and thrust them through the heart of Absalom, while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. So he killed him. And 10 young men that bare Joab's armor compassed about and smote Absalom and slew him. So he died a gruesome death for what he did. You know, he was already hanging in a tree. You understand? Just dangling there. Couldn't move. You understand? Then along come Joab and stabbed him 3 times in the heart, and he's still alive. And then his own men come by and smote him. I mean, other people of Joab come by and kill him. They stab him some more. Compassed about him, smote Absalom and slew him. Man, that's a horrible death for disrespecting the king. You understand? God is still on David's side. But all this happened because of one mistake. And Joab blew the trumpet, and the people returned from pursuing after Israel, for Joab held back the people. And they took Absalom and cast him into a great pit in the wood, and laid a very great heap of stones upon him. And all Israel fled, every one to his tent. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and reared up for himself a pillar, which is in the king's dale, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. And he called the pillar after his own name, and is called unto this day Absalom's place. Then said Ahimaaz the son of Zodok, let me now run and bear the king tidings, how the Lord hath avenged him of his enemies. And Joab said unto him, thou shalt not bear tidings this day, but thou shalt bear tidings another day. But this day thou shalt not bear no tidings before the king's son is dead. Then said Joab to Cushi, go tell the king what thou hast seen. And Cushi bowed himself unto Joab and ran. And then said Ahimaaz the son of Zadok yet again to Joab, but howsoever let me, I pray thee, also run after Cushi and Joab. Wherefore wilt thou run, my son, seeing that thou hast no tidings ready? But howsoever said he, let me run. And he had said unto him, run. Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and overran Cushi. And David sat between the 2 gates, and the watchman went up the roof over the gate unto the wall, and lifted up his eyes, and looked, and behold, a man running along. And the watchman cried, and told the king, and the king said, if he be alone, there is tidings in his mouth. And he came apace, and drew near. And the watchman saw another man running, and the watchman called unto the porter, and said, behold, another man running alone. And the king said, he also bringeth tidings. And the watchman said, methinketh the running of the foremost is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. And the king said, he is a good man, and cometh with good tidings. And Ahimaaz called and said unto the king, all is well. And he fell down to the earth upon his face before the king, and said, blessed be the Lord thy God, which has delivered up the men that lifted up their hand against my lord the king. And the king said, is the young man Absalom safe? And Ahimaaz answered, when Joab sent the king's servant, and me thy servant, I saw a great tumult, but I knew not what it was. And the king said unto him, turn aside and stand here. And he turned aside and stood still. And behold, Cushi came. And Cushi said, tidings, my lord the king, for the Lord hath avenged thee of the day of them that rose up against thee. And the king said unto Cushi, is the young man Absalom safe? And Cushi answered, the enemies of my lord the king, and all that rise against thee to do thee hurt, be as that young man is. And the king was much moved, and went up to the chamber over the gate, and wept. And as he went, thus he said, O my son Absalom, my son, Absalom, would God I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son, my son. So he still mourned for his son, even though his son tried to take his kingdom out of his hand. He was a forgiving father, you know. But some things, when they set in motion, there's nothing you can do about them. You understand? There's nothing you can do. It is what it is. You understand? But as you can see, David still was delivered out of all his troubles, no matter what went on his way. But let me pause and I continue again.